Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Hello, everybody.
Hey, guys. Hey, hi.
Hi, welcome to another day of the week.
Happy Tuesday.
Excellent.
So, when you do spring cleaning, and for those who are audio, I apologize, you find some old artifacts. This is a normal phone, right?
Okay. Yeah, Tommy's showing his.
Look at the old phones back in the day.
Tommy's showing his new iPhone. Was it the iPhone, the big one, the big iPhone?
This is a normal iPhone.
A normal iPhone. And then he found like an iPhone 3.
This is the iPhone 15 coming out. They're going smaller, but it's integrated with PBI, so the difference in size is incredible.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
In our move this last year, I found an old flip phone.
A flip phone.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Did you guys ever have a BlackBerry?
Yeah. I totally
did?
did.
Yeah, I found. Wait, those were in my.
I actually found one of those too.
I found in a bin way back in my room somewhere. There was it wasn't a BlackBerry. It was like the Windows phone, the version of a BlackBerry where it had a Windows operating system on it, kind of stuff. But it had a text keyboard. They had all the keys for all the different letters. So the kids found this. I'm like, "What's this?" And I'm like, "Well, you can play with it now because it doesn't do anything." So they
called an artifact.
It's an artifact. Yes, it's a relic from an old time past.
And the word of the day is snuffleupagus.
Blackberry. Can you say Blackberry?
Can you say Blackberry?
Anyways, so that was fun. They've been running around the house with the phones, these old phones, and thinking they're fun, and they're calling each other and I'm texting you. Da, da, da.
Yeah.
I was interjecting with the chat comments where folks were giving us a hard time for being recorded all the time. So our favorite Mr. Greggy B, snuffleupagus to you, sir.
There we go. It is a real time. We are really here for once. People have been traveling. It's been hard to record when people keep moving all over the place.
More travel in the future. So
So sorry about that.
I mean, you guys are getting free content, so
at least we're consistent,
Yeah.
Like we could just say, okay, we'll see you in 3 weeks,
in a month,
or whatever.
And Greg, I would say it, but I
such
also
a
can't
hard
say that
time.
word. Snuffle.
Much love, people. Much love.
We should do
Anyway.
I'm still all for. We should do a live podcast episode, in person.
Yeah, we should do a live one.
I know we're doing live right now.
It's
Yeah, I know.
almost like we would get up at 7:30 a.m. Central and talk to each other live. Wait,
Okay, maybe I need to phrase that differently.
You mean like all of us in the same room live together?
Room, yeah. Rent out a bar or something, or
rent out a bar
at 7:30 in the morning.
Wow, I think you have to rent out. I think you just show up and there's no one there.
Yeah.
Except when you travel internationally, you go to the bar. Everyone's at the bar internationally when you travel.
Especially Dublin.
As Tommy has learned on his recent trip.
They don't care what time it is.
They don't care what time it is.
24/7 bars. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just.
Tommy's like, I found my people.
So what's in the news today, gentlemen?
There's some good stuff coming out. So
good stuff.
I guess announced on the 10th, or actually, let's go with the 10th. The announced on the 10th by Lee Benjamin, Senior Program Manager, is a new now deployment pipelines, view and items code changes before deploying it. I think this is a step down the right path here. So if you read through the article, it starts showing you this, let's call it ALM toolkit. So for those of you who don't know, ALM toolkit is an what is it? How is the acronym ALM? Lifecycle management?
Application lifecycle management.
Is it application ALM? Application lifecycle management. So an ALM toolkit for Power BI made by Christian Wade has this program where you can say select a model, an old one, and select a new one, and it literally shows you the BIM line by line and says, oh, by the way, line number 5 has changed. It was this and it's now this. Or you deleted this section of stuff. So it does a really good job of analyzing what was occurring inside your data model. Well, now in deployment pipelines, you're now able to do the same thing. You can view the code changes.
Let's correct. You can see the same pane of view changes, right? Let's be cautious about you can do the same things that ALM can. it's not entirely accurate yet.
So,
Function-wise, right? We're
Yeah.
just you can see the code changes.
yeah, I think so. I think, I mean, just being able to observe them and note exactly what's occurring. So this has been our
Yeah.
all the time when you deploy anything inside anywhere in PowerBI.com. How do I know it's changing? I don't know. I have no clue. And I kept saying it'd be really great if you could just see a diff of just what you changed and what's coming through the pipeline, so you at least can say, that's not right. Now, it's going to just let you see what changed. It's not going to let you go back in and like modify, tweak, or adjust or make changes to the code. But I could very much see on a roadmap, if they're already showing you what's changing on a line-by-line basis, I could very much see in the future that you'd be able to then edit that slightly or tweak it a little bit further. So
That would be
I believe
powerful.
at SQL Bits, when they announced it, they said there'll be a VS Code extension to do just that.
yes. Oh, I will put this in the chat window already. This feature is already out. So I'll put it in the chat window here.
Already in the service.
It's already in. It says it's all available today. You can go look at it right about now. So this is the article here, and then I'll just jump over here to LinkedIn for our LinkedIn followers, and they can also see the article as well. So this is just announced. I think it was yesterday. The 10th is when it was announced. So this is hot off the press, just brand new, and Lean makes a note here that says, see here towards the end here, the change review is already available today in deployment pipelines, so give it a try. And there's actually some more technical documentation that goes a little bit more around comparing and doing the diffs as well. So there's also, here we go. So I'm also putting the other article out there as well. And it looks like some people are not seeing their tenant yet. So it does take a day or two for things to get rolled out to all tenants. I believe the blog articles are supposed to come out after it's been rolled out to all tenants. So maybe they're a little bit slow, not sure. But I'll also put these two comments in here as well for people who are interested in looking at the article. I would highly recommend reading it. This is going to be very impactful, I think, in general for people working on reports and deploying things. So I'll put these over here at LinkedIn. Any other thoughts, guys?
Not on that one. What about the more exciting topic or announcement?
This is another good one.
This is you guys. You guys were there at the beginning. There at the announcement. So I'm not taking this one.
It was kind of a thing, honestly. I kind of was really. I knew there was an announcement coming.
What are we talking about?
I didn't quite know exactly about what it was, but it's this new thing called the Tyndall. TMDL is how you would say it, and it sounds like the internal language of how that's being communicated about is the Tyndall is what it's being used as. So Rui Romano, nice job, Rui. Great release on Tyndall. Very, very excited about this one. So Rui, principal program manager for Power BI, has, if you look at the tabular object model, the TOM, there's a lot of parameters, settings, variables in there. It's typically in a JSON format. And we know how people love to work in JSON.
Oh, yeah.
Very verbose.
Very much. No one loves it. And this is hence why we have a theme generator. Yes. Because people don't like working in JSON. Well, the Tyndall is a YAML-like language. So YAML is yet another markdown language is what YAML stands for. But it's a more human readable language that you can use to then generate a standard, a spec. It's almost, you can translate YAML into JSON and back out of it, but YAML basically is a easier to read format for your settings. So what this is, there's actually a huge, it's being developed by the community. So Matthias Thierbach has been developing this and working with at the community portion of this directly with Microsoft and Rui, who have really outputted this new language. It's a brand new language. It's going to be a VS Code extension. You're going to be able to use it natively working in your data models. Yeah, it's Donald, to your point there. It's like working with XML, but way better to read than XML. So, yes.
It's like XML, but not frustrating.
It's like XML, but way better. So no, but it's another language here. And so this is going to be coming integrated in all of Microsoft's tooling. So in the article here, it talks about Tyndall will be integrated with a tabular editor. It'll be integrated with ALM Toolkit. It'll be integrated in Power BI Desktop. Trying to see if I'm trying to read all the items here real quickly. Just make sure you get the cap share. Yeah, PBI Tools will have it. Tabular Editor, ALM Toolkit, and it'll be supported by the community. So it's a community-based project. You can go experiment with features. You can go play with it. And it talks a lot about PBI tools and how it solves a long-standing problem in the Power BI development community, right? Talking about how do you put objects or Power BI into source control. And PBI tools really solves a lot of those challenges.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the big difference is there was a language before, but again, it was in JSON. So for anyone trying to develop on it was unusable. It's Tyndall, TDSL, right? And that was all JSON. But again, because of the lack of human readability or human interaction with it, so to speak, because it's in JSON, trying to edit an item was nearly impossible or something that wasn't worth the time.
Yeah, I would say like editing simple things like connection strings or like a line of code that you'd be able to identify, but like creating something or modifying large swath,
exactly,
not gonna happen.
And so
there's a lot of things that were like
heard of this before.
Exactly.
The idea why to do it.
And there's also, and again, selfishly here as well, I have also created an ideas at idea.powerbi.com. So everything we're talking about for Tyndall is all around the data model. And data models are a lot more regulated, right? There's a spec, there's a known quantity. It iterates and it's designed in a way that has a very standard specification around the model. But selfishly enough, there's not an equivalent version of a Tyndall for the report side, right? So the report is not this easy to read language around that as well. So I'll put the link here as well. I made an idea that said, hey, if we have Tyndall for the model, why not get Tyndall for the report?
Ribdall.
And so, was that?
Ribdall. Report model.
Ribdall, or, report, data model or something like that. So I think there needs to be another version of this. And so let me grab the link for that one as well. So if you're listening to this, if you like this idea of Tyndall and being able to read and edit things easily, here's the link for ideas for a report side as well. And go ahead and vote on this. So Microsoft watches this, and if we get enough votes on this, we can actually start letting Microsoft know that we're interested in this kind of idea. So I put the link in there as well. Go out and vote for another version of this. That way we actually go into the report side. Anyways, other thoughts around this one? The chat's kind of like all over the board on this one.
Yeah, Gregory's just pointing out that the XML and JSON formats are designed to be human readable, and he's correct. But we're just saying
more human readable.
Tyndall is more human readable, easier to work with, more editable.
Yes.
Dumb human readable.
Yes. Well, even doing diffs, right? I mean,
some of us are more challenged at reading, Greggy, right?
Yeah, it's exactly. Not all of us speaks robot all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I can read JSON pretty well now, but it's taken me quite a learning curve. Again, if we're thinking about like the business user,
Greg.
And if we're thinking about like making things for report builders or report the business users in general, right? They're not going to be as versed in programming language. They're just not going to be as comfortable as using JSON. So that's why I think a lot of this is coming with this simpler, easier to use language.
Well, the big difference here compared to what are we talking about JSON and YAML, and why is the big difference? In JSON, everything's quotation based. So if you're trying to do a measure with quotations, good luck trying to do that efficiently. YAML doesn't have that conflict, which is just that alone is a huge hurdle that is now solved for. So it's going to make it easy to edit multiple measures where you don't have to worry about, do I need to escape a character here? Okay, is that all escaped? It's easy to do. And from a user point of view, even if you're not in the developer mode or have ever worked with YAML, is something that you can easily pick up too. And
what I'll also do in the article as well, to your point, Tommy, there, if you are more curious about what this is doing and want to see more information about what is Tyndall, there's actually a YouTube video of Matthias and Gabby going through like a detail of, okay, here's what it is. Here's how it's working. Here's what it's going to give you. Here's the advantages of it. And here's some real code examples of what you can do with it. And to your point, Tommy, right? There's quotes, there's weird formatting things. In some cases around Power BI, there's like text JSON that is stored as text inside an object inside, like just weird stuff. So what Tyndall is aiming to do is to simplify a lot more of that and just make it much easier to use. The syntax is much simpler. When you do a DAX formula, the space, like, so in YAML, typical YAML format, your spacing is very important.
Right.
So the number of tabs you use is critical to getting the formatting correct. However, what Matthias has done on measures, and to your point, Tom, you said around like the M code and JSON, the M code in the DAX, you can then take DAX and M and you can change the formatting so it makes sense, and that way it reformats it correctly for what it needs to be inside the tool. So even though you're using this Tyndall format, it actually allows you some more flexibility in formatting for DAX and M code, which is, again, very helpful.
Right.
So
these are major announcements for the year. I think this will be one of the things we look back on 2023 that will be in our top 5.
What will be in our top 5?
Tyndall.
Oh yeah, this is gonna. When I heard about this, I thought this is changing how we're going to develop things. Like, this is fundamentally different, and you need to learn about this.
Yeah.
Mainly for the big enterprise folks, like big models, where we're already kind of interacting with the model on the back end for the most part.
Well, I would say from an efficiency point of view, because the ability to edit a model within in the process, even if you're not enterprise, this still makes sense. I'm not saying for every use case, but this absolutely does make sense regardless if you're enterprise or not.
What were you saying? Maybe I missed your point there.
The teams who are going to be using it.
Tyndall?
Yeah.
Well, okay. So if I think forward thinking here for a second, wouldn't it make sense again? If Tyndall's just more easy to read format, if you watch the video from YouTube, it's very easy to call up measures and columns.
Okay.
If we now pair that with what I'm seeing in the deployment pipelines, where I have this nice, clean side by side. Okay, here's the list of measures, here's the list of columns, and I can then one off. I think one of the challenges that this is addressing is doing those diffs, right? Being able to see side by side. I think it's actually Tyndall's actually easier to do a source control changes on items, and you also listen to what Matthias is talking about. Matthias also demos the ability to add comments to tables in a super easy format. So like you literally can create a column, you put 3 backslashes in front of the word column, and then write out the description. And it supports multi-line formatting. Right. So if you want multiple lines, like a carriage return on each one of them, you just start a new line. So in general, like the language of writing it is very intuitive. It almost feels like Markdown to some degree.
Yeah. And this will have this is the one that will have the VS Code extension.
Yes,
Tyndall.
totally.
There's going to be a Tyndall VS Code extension.
Yes. And there's already, I believe, a GitHub project out there. You have to kind of dig around for it. There's already a GitHub project from Microsoft for Tyndall. The details are starting to come out. So I think, anyways, I'm super excited about this. This is a monumental shift for Microsoft because everything at this point has been very like developer centric. I feel like this is opening up the developer walls a bit more to common users. So I feel like this is a great move.
Folk, yeah.
Anyways, I think this also dovetails very well into our conversation for today. So,
which was completely unplanned.
Oh, completely unplanned.
So unplanned. Yeah.
We couldn't have. I mean, how the day the blog was announced, we're already talking about the exact topic of that thing.
Well, I just for the users, not that you believe me, but we added this to the card on March 21st for our episode. So I'm looking at it. Just
happened to coincide with the day Rui, good job. I'm glad you looked at our Trello board and was able to release your blog article at the same time.
Public API for our topic board.
Exactly. Totally unplanned, but very, very good timing. So Tyndall coming out and the announcement of this, the videos coming out from that as well. Now we can start talking about, okay, what is source control? What does this look like? And I think this will be a good topic because this now influences how we think about and build source control for Power BI things. So let's jump in. Let's do a brief history of source control. What are you guys aware of? How do you understand source control from your perspective? How did you learn source control? Let's start there maybe even a little bit. How does that work for you?
How did I learn source control?
Yeah, what were your first projects around source control?
Projects or tools that we used?
Either one.
I mean, obviously using Visual Studio, VSTS, Visual Studio Team Services, and
on-prem or in cloud?
On-prem.
On-prem. Okay.
Yeah. Server
You were-
deployed
yeah.
from test environments to production,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
Had to go through the whole litany of process and
Yep.
testing and all that kind of stuff. Things have gotten a little more loosey goosey as the time goes on, without the restrictions, right?
But you were doing those on
Nice.
you were doing those on SQL Server stuff, right? That would be like SQL Server. You would
Analysis
have like
server,
yeah.
SQL
So
Server
you were
analysis
doing
services.
you were pulling down code, developing it in Visual Studio, and then you were deploying back to a branch. Were you automatically deploying from that branch directly into the servers, or were you going? How were you deploying?
We were. We
Yeah.
were back in the day. Yeah. I mean, now the organization I work for has different teams
Yes, to do that.
manage the actual deployments, right? So you
That's-
have
Yep.
devs
Your ops team.
like pushing into the branches, and then the ops team manages all the coordination of pushing that code into different environments.
So I feel like what you just described there is a trend that happens in many companies, right? It starts with, hey, we're doing this thing. The guy who does the code generation also does the deployment, right?
Yeah. Until that guy accidentally deploys something.
Until something gets borked really bad, right? And then after that, after something gets fouled up massively, we say, oh, maybe we should have had a bit more rigor around this. And you go find a person who's doing the deployment process. So now, but this is a growth thing though. I think it's like, the person who builds it deploys it. That's kind of like the initial step. The next step beyond that is, okay, we're deploying so many things. I need someone developing it, and I need to break out another role that is like a release manager or release management team. So we have that's like another team gets formed, and their sole job is there's so much to deploy now that they're regularly pumping out, test environments, prod environments, making sure things work. They're doing a lot of automated testing around that. So that way it works regularly, right?
Yeah, but at the same time, even like business intelligence teams in general have always just kind of had their own slice, right? Where we weren't bound by a lot of the same constraints related to data in different systems, deploying code into an application. Like typically it was you're still managing that on your own. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we have in today's current state is that due to Power BI having ultimate flexibility, right? There's real challenges not being able to align directly into a source control infrastructure, especially in situations where you're deeply embedding Power BI reports within applications. Like this is the biggest use case for me that has been a challenge, and not having good source control processes and capabilities around all aspects of the report, right? Like without limitation. And that's been one of the biggest challenges, because in these environments, I would love nothing other than to just lock up these reports and the way they go out in this cadence where everything is properly planned, coordinated, and the process is there. And that's one of the things that I don't think, I think is taken for granted in general, why you have DevOps, like ops teams to do this type of thing, is because if you think about, if you've ever had the ability, like the experience, whether it's in databases like myself, right, where you're developing a whole bunch of changes in a test environment and you're going to go and deploy into production over a weekend, right?
Oh boy.
The better that checklist is that you have, the more successful you will be. This is not something that is just like, oh, we throw it in the air and like when it goes out, no, like if you want to talk about rigor and like what you should have around like a repeatable, consistent process that the business abides by, that you have to, deploy things in a certain method without interjecting changes at the last minute and all this kind of stuff. Like these teams are kind of the prime examples in organizations of hardcore processes, and for a reason, right? Because you don't want to impact your customers negatively in any way, shape, or form. And ultimately, like it's very easy to play the, business intelligence internal, like we just deploy changes willy-nilly whenever we want to, but it falls apart in the other context where you're using Power BI reports as part of an application, as part of a service to somebody, where those mistakes, as easy as they are to like fix and change most of the time, they're still they're still avoidable. A lot of them are very avoidable.
Yeah.
So when I first got into it, more individual contributor, and it was terrifying. Like the idea of Git and source control was terrifying. Kind of thing. On if I had another branch, I'm like, where did my other stuff go?
Yeah, where's the branch? What branch am I on? How do I switch branches?
Yeah, I broke something. Why is it merged? I didn't want to touch merges.
I did so much work and now it's all gone.
Yeah. The first time I had a merge conflict, I was terrified. I'm like, I don't want to touch this. I rather reverse. So,
delete, replace.
Right.
Delete, replace.
But yeah, but then obviously it was self-learning, and now it's more from a team point of view. Honestly, used a lot with Power Apps, because Power Apps has had for over a year now source control in Git. And it's in the YAML language, which is ironic.
Shocking, right?
Right.
I mean, shocker. I mean, this is Microsoft's clearly going this direction.
Yeah.
Like if you look at all the things that they can do with so the only thing they haven't done really in YAML yet is so you look at Azure DevOps, YAML based deployment pipelines. Mm-hmm. You look at the linguistics model in Power BI, YAML. You look at Power Apps, YAML, right? Tyndall, YAML-like in nature, right? That is the direction Microsoft has taken. Like they're definitely going down this direction. The only one that's not there really yet is like the theme filing. Right. Like the theme stuff is not YAML. It's just JSON. I don't think they'll ever change that. No, because it's just such a pain.
And I remember the first time I had the idea of Power BI and source control was actually at like the Charlotte Power Platform World Tour in like 2018. Or 2017. It wasn't out yet, but I was working with someone I met, and we basically built the application from the GitHub source and just tested it out because it wasn't available yet. And I was like, the idea of that, testing it out was incredible. The idea that you can actually look at a file, because before it was like SharePoint, that was source control with Power BI and the version history. But then to be able to actually see the differences, that's when you obviously could see the potential of not just, hey, what changed? I don't know. I know something did. I just don't know what. So, and actually say, oh no, it was actually these lines of DAX were changed. Not even just that measure. This line was changed. It's like, this has to be something to learn.
Yeah, I agree. And I think so let me give, so Seth, you went through your kind of first interaction with Git. Seth, Tommy, you went through your next interaction of Git. And I've been, I think, very heavily from the business side of things. So I had a very small interaction with a little bit of, DevOps or Git branching that was from like DevOps repos online. So that was my I didn't really spend a lot of time on TFS on-prem. I was at the time when I started getting involved with a lot of this, it was more focused on the cloud side of things. But I really thought this was great because I worked with teams that were doing a lot of the check-in, check-out deployment pipeline pieces, and we had like a DevOps team that was their job. We would build code, and then we would build everything in dev. Okay, dev's ready to go. We would then lift this over to another team, and they would produce the next step to get through test, run a whole bunch of tests, everything checked out. They would then go in to move it into production. So there's a specific team just doing releases. But that was my first interaction. And then as I kind of went out on my own, doing consulting work and gigs work, I've now done everything in Git repos. So I don't like using Word for documentation or SOWs or writing statement of works. I use Markdown for everything. I love Markdown because it can make a fairly good looking document. I mean, literally, if I can describe in a website or thinking through like a project on GitHub, right? If I can go to a project on GitHub and I can talk in technical terms to other people using Markdown, I have to be able to communicate between business users using the same kind of language. It's very simple. The syntax is easy to learn. It's a little bit more Cody based than most people, but I hate going into Word and trying to figure out, why does this table not format correctly? Why can't I center this dumb thing? Like, I just don't care to waste time formatting things. I would rather have the document be longer and do a little bit less formatting and change how I'm writing the information so that's easier to like inject it into code. But that's how I do everything now. So all of my statement of works, all of my documentation for customers, I'm checking in and them out of a Git. So I have Git repos for all of my specific things. And side note, this is Michael's kind of like AI is taking over the world moment. This is a side thought. If you use, so when I write my Markdown, I write all of my stuff inside Visual Studio. Studio Code. And Studio Code has ChatGPT in it. So now when I write that in Copilot, So now when I write stuff, documentation or everything else, because it looks at the entire repo when it's looking at your code. So anytime I use phrasing from another statement of work or anything else, it's actually picking up my language and filling out complete sentences for me as I write stuff. And I'm like, now I can just start a thought, and then it can present. And then you can even now with Copilot, you can actually, there's a key command, I don't remember it off the top of my head, but you can key command it, and you can see different versions of the same language it's writing. So you don't get one solution. You could have 3 or 4 or 5 different language pieces. So, hey, the data warehouse is important because, and then it fills out the rest of the sentence for you. And then you use the shortcut command, and then you have 4 different versions of what it's saying. And you can pick the one you want. It's incredible.
You converted me. I read everything marked out, and then that ability of just pressing tab.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's all checked in. It gets, and then the idea here too was I just need to learn Git better. So this was also if I just adopt it and say make it part of my workflow, I will become better at using Git. I'll be able to check out branches. I'll understand commits and then pushes to main a lot more easily. So I think it's great, but this is a very lacking piece of like what's happening inside the Power BI ecosystem, because you really can't do that same level of effort with models and thin reports today.
Right.
We don't have that capability.
Notice all the items we've talked about, unless I think Seth had nothing to do with Power BI or tabular models. All the source control has yet to relate to this. We're talking about the history and our own history too, because there has been relatively minimal feature sets or tool sets.
I mean, when specifically you're talking about building and developing within Power BI itself, right? Like, because you could still source control if you have an independent analysis services model, right? So like we're talking within the context of creating, building, deploying, within the context of Power BI.
But can't you even? I mean, you can. There's like 2 parts I think you want to source control, right? You want to source control the model, and then the thin reports, right? And so I think the challenge becomes when you have the model and the thin report as the same file. That's when things get very difficult to source control, I think. What are your guys' thoughts?
It's all hard.
It's all hard. Well, and let me give you some more of my reasoning here, right? The reasoning behind this is if the model and the thin report are together, it's like a thick report. It has the data model and the report together, right? If you are in an enterprise environment, you likely have premium at some level, either premium per user or you're doing premium as a paid service. So with that, if as a premium as a paid service, you now have the XML endpoint. So the model is very well defined, and you can build entire pipelines of, I'm going to check in this code and it will then deploy using the XML endpoint. We can deploy code directly into models.
Right.
So to me, I feel like, yes, it's not probably the easiest way of deploying things, but you have the ability of making a regular process around deploying the model only with code, with a check-in, check-out mentality. Would you guys agree?
It's an option, but I don't think there's necessarily a streamlined option, because there's a lot of different ways that we've done it. Like, I know for us, it's not so much been around the gold and thin reports. It's been the use of SharePoint or the use of a OneDrive for version history.
Yep. And I think the reason I'm making this distinction is you can still use SharePoint for version history of those files, but I'm thinking purely like if we're saying, let's actually just straight up, so one of the demos of Tyndall, which I think is really important here, is Tyndall created a data set from scratch in the PowerBI.com service. So they were able, Matthias was able to directly, so one of the challenges today is if you have an XML endpoint and you're trying to modify your models, today, there is no method to create a data set in PowerBI.com with just code from nothing. You have to deploy like a minimum a Power BI file that goes to the service first. It has to initially deploy the model. Once the model's there, then you can create all the other assets, and then you can modify it with code, right? So you have to today start with a PBIX file that is the model. But Tyndall and what Matthias demoed in PBI Tools was you don't need that anymore. PBI Tools can bundle up this language, this starting point, create everything you need, and publish in its entirety directly to the service without having any model. So one of our biggest gripes, my biggest gripe with desktop right now is if I'm in desktop and I'm making a model only PBIX file, I can't just deploy just the model. I have to deploy the model and a thin report or a report that goes with it. So you always get this, my enterprise data warehouse model, and then there's like my enterprise data warehouse report. So there's always a blank report, and I have an image on the report page that says, hey, this report is made blank. This is on purpose. This is just the model. Don't use this for reporting.
Well, I mean, I agree, but think about the amount of people who use Tableau Editor or are familiar with it. I think this is even a smaller subset of people who are going to use that deployment option. Like Tyndall is still going to be a very small subset of users in Power BI. Okay, well, let me ask you this: are there going to be more people using Tyndall or Tableau Editor?
Well, so okay, let's distinguish some things here, right?
Okay.
I think there are different personas that are going to be using these different tools, right? So one persona is I'm the person who's going to go to PowerBI.com and consume reports. That is by far the largest audience you're going to have using Power BI. Just give me reports. I don't care about all the technology behind it. That's your biggest audience. The next smaller audience is I'm going to build a report on top of someone else's data model. My argument there was like, that's another smaller population, but they're not going to use Tyndall either because they're only focusing on building thin reports on top of existing models that are already developed. Now, what I would argue is any of the data modelers who are doing data modeling on a report, almost 100% of them, I would say a very large majority, maybe not initially, but eventually, anyone who's doing data model development will want to use Tyndall and these source control methods. And if they're not doing it today, any enterprise level data sets should also be thinking about and or trying to leverage and using this new world that is Tyndall, right? So to your point, Tommy, right? Are the majority of Power BI users using Tyndall? No, they're not. But of the people who are actually developing models, a large majority of them will want to use this new technology and want to use this check-in, check-out methodology. And Greg brings up a really good point. The whole reason of source control is I can have Tommy working on a definition of table A and Seth can be working on table definition B. And because those are two separate objects, I can merge the changes together and then publish them at the same time. So
or publish them independently.
In two different, yeah.
Because Tommy's stuff sucks and it broke, right? Like,
and not let his changes go through. Yeah, exactly.
Right. It's primarily a fantastic resource for multiple people working on the same thing, the same model at the same time, deploying or report, right? Deploying different aspects of it within and allowing them to be merged together, right?
Yeah. As a side note to this also as well, if today couldn't get any better for everyone, the April desktop is out. I just downloaded it from the service. Oh my goodness. So Tyndall's announced. Desktop for April is out. This is like the best day ever. There goes my work. There goes my work day.
This is like the only live episode you'll need for like another month. I mean,
that's all you're getting.
It's that good.
Jesus. Okay, so let me ask a question then, because I agree with what you're saying, but is Tyndall and the source control in the context that we're talking about here going to be more for enterprise level teams only or more centralized, or it's going to be for individuals at all or for smaller teams?
Do you want the Microsoft answer or do you want my answer?
I want your answer. I'll ask Microsoft another day.
So let me start with the Microsoft answer
I'll
first.
be Microsoft on the call.
Well, true.
So
there's a reason for that.
Here. So the reason I'm saying I'm starting with the Microsoft answer is because everything comes with premium, right? So the Microsoft answer is if you're on premium, these features will be a help to you. That's kind of where Microsoft seems to put out all these new fancy features. All the bells and whistles come to premium first. I mean, that's just what they do. So I think what their method here is to the madness is trying to push more people going towards that premium SKU to get these features. Now, Tommy, to your point, so what's my answer, right? I think best practices or better, let's call it not better, best practice. Let's call better practices, right? Better practices would be to figure out how to leverage this in your environment as well. So what I don't know is, will there be specific features blocking this capability at the pro level of user? Because a lot of this hinges, from my understanding, a lot of this hinges on having the XMLA endpoint exposed to you. And because the XMLA endpoint is is the connection string into that PowerBI.com service level. I think that without having the XML endpoint exposed to the pro user, I think you're going to be limited, and you will have to build things using PBIX files and publishing through desktop. I don't think you're going to be able to automate a lot of stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or maybe you can do something kind of a little tricky here, where you're building published things, and maybe you're using a couple APIs with a service principal to kind of push files around, maybe. Or maybe there's a series of APIs that you can publish to dev, and then maybe you can use these APIs to help you do like moving files around. I just don't see it as being as smooth of an exercise as those who are already on premium. So I would love to have it in pro, but realistically, I think it's only going to be a premium feature.
Was there a question in there for me?
There was the same question. Is this more for enterprise level teams, or can this work for smaller, either individual or smaller centralized?
I mean, anything can work, right? But at the same time, like the use cases increases in value as you go into larger teams that are going to be concurrently working on a report or making more changes all at the same time, right? Like, and that's where I think the value prop of this being a premium feature, where you're adding that behind the license, makes sense, because it's like already premium in and of itself is extremely valuable for what you're getting, right? And are there use cases where it's like smaller organizations? Yeah, absolutely, right? But I don't play in those realms.
So selfishly, you're already there.
Selfishly, I'm there. It's fine.
So,
but yeah, I would say it's more you're gonna purchase that value when you see, like, you're buying a whole ecosystem. And to me, in the premium license conversation, to me, I think it's a very easy one for an organization that's even mid-size, because it's a matter of how you position it, right? All of the infrastructure that was independent servers and licenses and like all the hardware to support all these things, and your interaction, like Power BI is so much more than just the reports. And if you can describe that and talk to those aspects of things, it goes a long way in making that a pretty easy conversation.
I'd agree with that as well.
So
I think it's a good way of saying it.
I think that goes a little into a question that I have, and I've been thinking about, especially since we saw the announcement of Tyndall. Will the majority of BI teams, or should the majority of BI developers be experienced in source control and Power BI within the next 5 years? And I've been considering this, and now I think it's ever more prominent now with both announcements today. Myself, I would say yes. I would think that if you are Power BI every day, which I would say that in the next 5 years, I would expect that to be one of the skill sets of someone I would be interviewing, that I would want on my team.
What do you mean by that, though? Right? Like the source of our conversation today is how broken this is. Like, you're saying we're going to have a better solution that is that allows us a clear process and path for source control.
This is the introduction.
Then yes, right? Yeah. Like ultimately, if it gets to the point where we have systems and tools that allow us to manage our Power BI artifacts the way that we would want them to, related to source control mechanisms, a repeatable process that's easy for people to follow, and that becomes a standard practice, then absolutely. If you're if you want to get into a BI team, or your enterprise and your Power BI, Power BI all the time, then yes, source control absolutely should be part of the things that you know how to do. But right now, it's very difficult because it's only the hardcore nerds that are like figuring out different solutions. Nerds in the general term. I am too, right? Like, don't take that derogatory. It's like we're finding solutions because it's not supported, right? Like, so it's a hack over here or a hack over there, or somebody builds a third-party tool or something that we can integrate and use, but it's still a very disjointed experience that still isn't a good one.
No, I wouldn't expect it now, but I would imagine this is going to be just another one of those skill sets that you need to have. Mike, what do you think?
So I'm gonna pull back just a little bit on your comment. I think I agree with you, Tommy. No, I think says Tommy's comment. So Tommy, I like your comment there. I think you're right. I think this is a new world order that's coming. I think we're bringing
That's pulling back.
Yeah, I think we're bringing into light here. Again, these are a lot of things that IT has proven works well. IT has said this stuff is easy to use once you understand how to use it, and it helps with robust, regular reporting. So I would say in the space of reporting that is on the governed or more certified side of the world, right? These kind of things, this rigor that we're talking about is something that has been missing from Power BI. It has been purely a tool. Power BI has been a tool built for the business user. It has been built for the users of Excel who I'm just stitching some data together. I'm blending some information, and I'm going to find some quick insights. One of the things that has been lacking from the Power BI community is any developer-centric things, right? There's been almost no help there from the developer. So what has happened is the more expertise users in model development, and the further down you go down this route, the more you do deeper creation closer to the model, the higher the tool skills need to be, right? So I think this is a natural progression. I think Microsoft also is addressing the largest population of need first, and then coming back and backfilling in the more specialized needs. And what I mean by that is the largest need was we have hundreds of millions of users who could immediately use Power BI and find value right away. So let's address those needs first by getting them a tool that's easy to use. Now we're getting to a point where there's so much of this, there's so much proliferation. We now need better controls to regularly release this stuff. And so what we're doing now, instead of Microsoft moving fast and building, again, it's a speed trade-off, right? If I don't define a spec for the report, I can just keep changing reports all day long from Microsoft's perspective. I can add a new thing here, I can add a new widget there. We can go to on visual editing. We can do all these, so if you don't define the definition of what a report has to do, you can continue to iterate on what is the best experience for users to build. You do that by not defining standards, right? As soon as the model defines a standard, the model is so pivotal to what Power BI needs to do. The model has been clearly defined, and you see the iterations in the design cycle on the model much slower than the report side, because that's a defined spec. It slows things down. So what I think you're seeing now is we're getting to a place where people are finding value, and we're able to slow down the development or iteration of reporting such that we're now able to start standardizing and making specs around stuff. And now we're getting the more integrated pieces. Again, I think the large enterprise customers are asking for this, and Microsoft's now listening, and we're starting to get, CI/CD and Git for everything. I mean, every product Microsoft's pulling out now, it's all being like day one, they're trying to add some level of Git into that information. So I guess to wrap up my thoughts here, right? If we look at the different personas of people and the amount of impact that is available to those roles, the skills matrix, we're focusing a lot of effort right now on the data modeler. That is the person that I think a lot of these things apply to. This does not apply to a report builder. This does not apply to a report consumer. But I would argue the report builder and report consumer are very large audiences, and that's what Microsoft was trying to address first. So I guess I would say it like this, right? We are very excited because we are at the deepest level. Tommy, to your point, who do I hire and how do I bring that person into my organization? What skills do they need? If I'm hiring a data modeler and a report builder and a report consumer, if that's the kind of person I'm trying to hire in my organization, 100%, they need to know this. 100%, this is part of their skill set. But if I'm hiring just a report builder, I don't think I would necessarily need them to know this. Yeah. So I think it really aligns to what you expect them to do. And I think this is a big miss when hiring managers are bringing on talent into Power BI. I don't think hiring managers are clearly identifying what skill am I trying to fill. Am I going to fill a data modeler? Am I filling the data engineering? Am I filling the report builder side of things? If you clearly define that, your skill set changes.
So I'm going to say a statement, true or false, based on what you said. In 2026, a successful data modeler knows and is experienced in Tyndall and source control.
100%.
Okay.
A data modeler, 100%.
Regardless of the size of the team.
I would agree. Because I think you're going to get more experience. Again, now that Microsoft's going to build those things into the tools, I mean, small teams will still want to use deployment pipelines.
I would 100% agree with you.
So I think smaller mid-sized teams are still going to need to use this technology. And again, I think Microsoft did a smart thing by making premium per user, because now we can take all these premium level features and bring it to a really small team for a very efficient cost. Yeah, 100%. We need to know what's going on.
What's intriguing is I still don't know. I still don't think we know what source control and PBI is going to really look like.
Agreed.
Like this is, yes, it's just introduction with the language.
Correct.
But in terms of how the process is going to be, I think that is still an unknown. No.
Agree. I agree. I think there's still some more development to be done there. And I think it's going to be up to us to define what that looks like. Right. I mean, again, this is, you have to walk before you can run. And I think this is the walking step here. The walking step is, can you even just manipulate a data model or report with code only? That's the starting point. And once you have that figured out, now you can start building, okay, what does the process look like to make this deployable?
I was going to say, we're going to be heavily dependent on the technology here. This
totally
is GPT, where the technology is going to dictate a lot of that process. This is that first part. Are there any other tools out there, technology for source control in Power BI at this point?
So,
I mean, you're only talking about model size now, right? Because if you think about, even when I was talking about VSTS, like that included the reports.
I mean, you can do it today with PBI tools, right? You can store a report as code. I'm not sure if I would trust the ability of two people working on the same report at the same time and merging the changes at the end using PBI tools. I think you might have really weird effects. But I have done, so personally, I have taken a report, run it through PBI tools, decompressed it into a lot of little objects. I've gone in, I found the visual, and I modified the X and Y position of where that visual lives. Then I recompiled that file back down to a PBIT, a template, reconnected my data set, and it did move the visual in the right spot. So like, you do have some tools today that will let you modify the code that will then adjust the report. But it's unsupported by Microsoft. And I think this is what you're seeing now is this is the first lens of Microsoft starting to support these things. But you have to think about it, right? Microsoft is only interested in generating more monthly active users. MAUs is like, I think the metric they use, right? When you look, every time you see the Business Application Summit, there's always the chart. Look at our monthly active users. Like this chart is like exponentially growing. Microsoft is so focused on that adding source control is not generating monthly active users.
Yeah. You think about like enterprise efforts, right? And those directly fly in the face of business value for them, right? Like, okay, great. Like you're a giant, you're a big BI team and you're doing some implementation of, Power BI embedded for certain use cases. That's one compared to 10,000 users across a couple companies, and so the ratio for that sort of reporting and the value it provides to them is probably much lower. I would say, in general, like my thoughts on this are, standards around source control and manipulation of all the model and reporting artifacts won't be used until that barrier of entry is lowered and the standards across the user base are kind of defined, right? And we're doing that. We have some pieces that, like Power BI tools, or through some of the other methods of managing some of this in a better way to make a better experience for end users, is we manipulate, but at the same time, like it requires that I think tool, the process to, for everybody to start glomming onto it and it being a de facto part of a deployment.
So if I'm a PI, if I'm a developer now or a pro, what's the secret sauce for me to get ahead of this? Right? In terms of, I got to learn some of this. I maybe never used source control yet. I'm hearing this podcast and I'm hearing, oh, this is going to be a thing. What should someone in this instance start learning to kind of get ahead of the game?
That's a great question.
I think the things we're talking about.
Yeah.
Like just be cognizant of what's going on, right? YAML, the new Tyndall. I would say
learn those things.
Absolutely be the person that's already interacting with the models in the Power BI service and understand like what capabilities we have, the third-party tools,
XMLA endpoint. Get comfortable with that.
Yep, because those are the things that we're already broaching and talking about related to like what does the deployment look like? What are the languages and files and tool sets that we're managing already, and the challenges within there, right?
I mean, first and foremost, you should be listening to the Explicit Measures podcast because we're going to be in the forefront of all this stuff. And so if you want to know when desktop's released, moments after it's released inside the service, before the blog is even out, you should definitely be listening to the podcast because everyone's checking out this stuff. So, I mean, I would agree with you 100%, Seth. I would say, things I would start learning right now is I would start learning while the tools may change and things may adapt, SSMS, SQL Server Management Studio, connecting to XML endpoints, understand how that works. Understand what partitioning looks like and how partitioning works and incremental refresh works inside a model in the service. Be comfortable with working with the XMLA endpoint, right? Make sure you can connect to it with multiple tools, Tabular Editor, SQL Server Management Studio. Understand how those tools work and what they can do to the model. I would also go through and to make sure that I understand more of like understanding the definition of what a model can do. And then I would just stay in tune, listen to what Microsoft is doing around Tyndall and see where that's going to go, because I believe Tyndall is going to really impact how you are going to develop in the future. So anything Microsoft says around CI/CD, YAML, I think is another language that'd be interesting to learn, get familiar with it, how it works. Again, it's very close to Tyndall anyways. So those would be my advices.
Yeah, and I would say download the April desktop today, and then immediately after, download and install VS Code and create a repo. Get started familiar with it.
You work on Git. Yeah, be comfortable checking in, checking out. Mm-hmm.
The fact that these two articles came out the same day obviously was not a coincidence, and it's showing the investment.
You give Microsoft too much credit.
What a coincidence then.
Then there you go.
What a coincidence.
What a coincidence. Yeah. Wow, that was related. So, but I would say that shows the investment that they have in this, and that's going to be aligned with source control. So start getting familiar with that. Start getting familiar with source control. Start getting familiar with YAML, and I think that's where you can be in 3 years. So
I would agree with that one as well. So with this, we're at kind of the end of our episode. So it's time for what does ChatGPT say? So I went in here and the question today was, what are the best source control options for Power BI? And ChatGPT thinks it's first, number one, Azure DevOps. It's second, Git. It's a widely distributed version control system. And then it talks about GitHub. Same thing, basically, but okay, fine. And then it talks about Visual Studio Team Services, VSTS. Okay, yes, that is another version of Git. And then it says finally Bitbucket. So it took the language of purely a Git repo or being able to do source control with tools. I didn't see on here SharePoint, because that's really the only way you can really version control Power BI files in an efficient way today, which would be SharePoint. So
I'm giving that a 4.5.
I would say this is a very low. Yeah. ChatGPT, you missed it on this one. This was not a very well articulated answer from my perspective, but I understand it was probably looking for more of the source control, and it lost the context of how do you implement this for Power BI. Apparently, ChatGPT does not scan the Power BI.tips website.
2021.
Yeah, exactly. True. Circa 2021 too. Maybe I should have asked it to Bing Chat and see how it would have responded there. So, anyways. With that, we appreciate your listenership. Everyone, Mark, you gave it 2 out of 7. Yeah, I agree. This is a very low ranking one on this one.
That's right, the 2 out of 7. I forgot that. Yeah.
So
he's talking about Python, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a sidejack one.
Oh, sorry. So with that being said, thank you all very much for your listenership. This was a lot of fun. Good topic today. A lot of new things coming out. If you want to stay in touch with what's happening, go check out the Microsoft blog. A lot of things are developing, being deployed as we speak, which is very exciting. If you like this episode, if you had some thoughts around it, we'd love for you to share your thoughts on Twitter or LinkedIn or respond back to the videos. We love to have other interaction. We like to hear what other people are saying about this topic as well. Where do you think this is going? Is this going to be the new world? Is this going to be how we to build things in the future? Where do you see this looking like in your workflow today? So respond. We'd love to have your feedback. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You're going to find the podcast anywhere it's available: Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Leave a rating on Apple and Spotify. It helps us out a ton. If you want to join the conversation with the community, you can do so every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central on all of PowerBI.tips social channels.
Awesome. We appreciate you all very much. Thank you very much for today, and we'll see you next time.